Good morning, late March 2020. Time for Freshly Pressed 981. I am Ayo Mairo Ese.
I am Valentine Ohu. Good morning.
Joining us for analysis this morning, we have Tunde Okufi. Morning, Tunde.
Morning, Ayo. Good morning, Valentine.
Good to have you on the show. Tunde's at Big Coops on Twitter. We have Mr. C. Hello, Mr. C.
Good morning, Ayo. Welcome back. Good morning, Val. Good morning, gentlemen. Good
Thank
morning,
you.
Lagos.
At Mr. C is his handle on Twitter. And also we have Cheta. Morning, Cheta.
Good morning.
All right. At Chxta on Twitter. All right, Lagos, if you'd like to join the conversation, we'd love for you to send us your message to WhatsApp 0809 444 0981. On YouTube, we're streaming live. Smooth 981 FM Lagos is our YouTube channel, so just subscribe to it. And of course, also on Twitter, we're at Smooth 981 FM. Use the hashtag Freshly Pressed 981.
Our first story, we'll take this from Premium Times. 15 confirmed dead as survivors salvage properties from Lagos fire. That was a fire that engulfed parts of Abulado. I said 15 people lost their lives, some school children. Terrible losses, reactions from the federal government, from the presidency themselves, the state's officials responding. But Cheta, how do you see the whole response system and the, catastrophe? I'll call it that.
No, first of all, God rest the dead. I'd rather not talk about the reactions. I think that's diversionary. I want to talk about two things really. Our attitude towards mass incidents like this when people die, and then our regulations or lack of regulations. So I think first things first, I've read the NEMA press statement from various news outlets. And what struck me, I read it including from the News Agency of Nigeria, which is supposed to be the most authentic source. What struck me in all of them was NEMA just said 15 people have died. This attitude that we keep having of just putting out numbers and forgetting about it dehumanizes all of us, and it's something that we should work against. Story: the principal of the secondary school, a girls' secondary school, who died, her name was Reverend Sister Henrietta Aloka. She was the principal of Bethlehem High School at Abulado, and she died rescuing her students. She is a hero. She was a hero.
Yes.
For putting her students first. So why can't we name her? Why can't we tell people her story? Why can't we tell people the story of a Catholic priest whose name I haven't been able to get, who was involved in rescue operations, and then a pillar fell on him and killed him? Why can't we tell people the stories of the family, father, mother, and two sons who were killed? Now, I would like to thank the Almighty that this happened on a Sunday. It's happened at a time that traffic was relatively light. Coincidentally, my village meeting was around there yesterday. It took me 30 minutes to drive from my house to the Festac area generally, which is something that will be impossible during the week. So imagine if this thing had happened during a weekday when everybody was on the road. The tragedy would have been of unimaginable proportions. So we should be grateful for those small things, but we should desist from this Nigerian habit of just thanking God and moving on. There needs to be an inquiry. What happened? How is it that buildings got so built? I mean, don't we have regulations? So it's easy to bash the government for building pipelines through populated areas. But we should remember that these pipelines were built in the 70s, in the oil boom, when all of those areas were bush. So where the government is at fault is there are supposed to be regulations, yet people still build on top of those places. I used to live in Abuleba. Time has passed. Like joke like 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, and not too far from where I live, there was a pipeline, and the house I was living in was new at the time. So how did these things get planning permission to be built there? Who sold the land?
Yes.
These are questions that we should ask, and people should be brought to account. Unfortunately, Nigeria is not a normal country, so I don't have any hope that this thing I'm talking will happen.
Unfortunately, these things come to light when we have disasters like
And
this.
then,
We
Tragedies.
assume,
we
yes,
talk about it for 3 days and move
and
on.
move on.
That's the problem.
In my area, there's a filling station in a densely populated area, and I kept asking who gave them the planning
permit.
permission to build a filling station,
There
because
is a
God forbid
petrol
anything
station.
happens.
There's a petrol station on Admiralty Road in Lekki Phase 1.
There are two.
Oh,
Yeah,
two,
two.
sir.
Oh, yeah.
One has caught fire before.
Yeah.
There's been a fire. At,
The planning
one.
permission, I've seen the original plans for Lekki Phase 1. That area is supposed to be residential.
Yeah,
Mm.
access to
What happened?
Yeah,
And it's
so-
surrounded by buildings.
Yeah, but most of those buildings are office.
Uh-huh.
So is it? So are we going to just start praying that whenever, if ever one of those
Mm,
petrol
the
stations
residence is there.
And it's very
explodes,
close
that
to
should be
major
on a
junction.
Sunday?
Yes, 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 yes. Yeah.
That it should be on a Sunday. Is that
Please.
how we should be
And
living?
you know how there's traffic are built up on that.
Mm.
Please, honestly, these are sore points that sometimes we avoid. And
Yeah.
you're right. After 3 days, we'll say God rest the dead, and then
In fact,
another story will take over.
the days are reducing. By today, we've moved on to the next thing.
Yes.
People are talking about
Yeah.
something
Last week,
else.
we weren't we dwelling on Sanusi?
Yeah, yeah. And so today we're talking about oil lines, or maybe potentially maybe even maybe gas lines, because I don't think we've heard anything that is clear and convincing.
And how did the
Well,
fire even start?
There's
houses-
someone who said that, and I think I give him
Said
some.
it was sparked by
That was
leaking
condensate.
gas.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean the first person who alerted me that there was an explosion was Tunde Okufi.
Mm.
He lives in Egbeda.
Mm.
He heard it.
It was-
Petrol doesn't explode.
It was
that
yeah,
loud.
yeah. It was heard as far as from this. It was heard in Ilupeju. It was heard.
Yes, yes.
It was
Heard in
very-
Agbara.
it was heard in Agbara. It was heard in so
Huh?
many different
Things
places.
scattered. The guy who was at our village meeting yesterday, things scattered glass in his house.
Yeah, I was going to say glasses were shattered from houses,
They said
cars
as
were
far-
Churches.
As far back as far like the areas
The
that they
radius.
heard, they felt it. Even Abulado, Festa Town, the Degun, areas around all those
Which brings
places.
us to another conversation: insurance.
Uh,
Yeah,
All the
yeah,
people who lost
yeah,
property.
People, it's not a habit for people to insure their houses. You're all absolutely right. But like I said, today we're talking about gas explosion. What about, there's so many things where we shouldn't build around, or residences shouldn't be around. High power lines, another that we find very very prominent. There's a long list of things that shouldn't be around residences, and you wonder how people get building permits. And you have governments, and you have people, they collect land, they
Yeah.
collect
Timeka from Adeba says, my condolences to the families that lost their lives as a result of the explosion. Our government should make efforts to prevent some of these incidences by stopping people building around hazardous zones. MI from Akoga says, our thoughts are with the families that are affected. There are no words. Kingdom Reward said on yesterday's disaster, Lagos State government needs to put a regulation to deter people from living close to pipelines. It's an avoidable situation. Bengals says, our town planning laws should be reviewed. I can't understand why there are so many buildings where pipelines are buried. We haven't even recovered from the Abulegba explosion, which happened in January. May the Lord console those who lost properties yesterday. Cruz says today we're discussing pipelines. High voltage lines are under horrible danger.
Exactly.
Another horrible danger we've overlooked.
Yeah, health dangers over like a prolonged period of time. I think again yesterday's instance highlights our emergency response readiness. For videos that were taken many minutes and sometimes several hours after the incident didn't show any or highlight any authorities or government response on ground.
I thought Lasima responded quite quickly in terms of a statement. I don't know what with
Statements,
regards to
So
having
just like
men
you
on
said,
ground.
they said the fire service was tweeting before they,
arrived.
long before they arrived.
Mm.
So these things are not done on social media.
Lola said, I saw videos of exploded big or tall gas canisters close to the explosion site. I have seen and heard devastation caused by normal 12.5 kg cylinders. This many big cylinders exploding at the same time and one after the other will definitely be dangerous. Also, who knows if there are diffused gas in the area previously if there were. All right, let's move on to talk about another story from the bin. It's a bit of like a track record. So Nigeria earns 400 billion from solid minerals in 12 years. How I'm not because the first question in my mind is okay from this money.
On to is another question,
Mm.
apparently we signed up to the ETI, which is supposed to highlight that. But I'll come back to that in a bit. So we earned this solid mineral sector has contributed 400 billion naira to Nigerian economy over a 12-year period. That's 1.1 billion US dollars. and that comes to about 92.5 million US dollars every year, which isn't entirely bad. And then you look at it and you see that of this more than half of that income or earning was between 2015 and 2018. Where is that now? 69 billion.
69.47
was contributed in 2018 alone. So you can see that there's a clear uptake because there is added or increased focus on the solid minerals sector. The clear ways that the government can diversify government income, but also the war between the real powerhouses in the oil industry, Russia and Saudi, Russia, Saudi Arabia on one side, for having their own different motives, and the US and shale producers on the other, and we, the grass, or the guys who are not really at the table, are the ones suffering. But if we diversify our incomes, we'll be more insulated against those kind of shocks, and we'll be so worried that we won't make any FX income to support the naira, because it's a clear policy of ours. There's so many things. We're blessed with so many things. The government, but this is a clear one that the government can focus on to help to diversify the income. So it's good. Like you said, it's a report. This report has come out because we signed up to the EITI standard.
Yes.
And we like to stand up. We like to sign up. We like to sign up to standards. EITI standard is the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, and it's an audit report that's supposed to really make everything transparent. I wonder where the transparency has gone to, because it is supposed to highlight who gets licenses, who the beneficiary owners of companies, that get these licenses are, how they operate, down to who they employ, and how, not just how much they make, but what social impact that income has on a country. So it's not that something that's just been extracted and then the money is hiding somewhere in a Swiss bank account, right? But we all know, and it's not just for solid, the solid minerals, it's also for the industry. And we know how opaque our industries, and we know how untransparent even the award of oil blocks are. So we signed up to this standard. Can we adhere to it fully?
I like that question, because that really links nicely to the next story, Mr. C. In terms of transparency, in terms of reporting, in terms of how transparent, exposing details of how some money has been implemented, used for certain projects that they said was said to be used, or the intention originally. But Abacha loots that keeps giving. There's according to this report, now the Socio-Economic and Accountability projects, they asked the federal government, former military head of state, back into the country where you put into use. But the response wasn't palatable. Federal government said no record of the exact amount.
Okay, so the headline is actually quite misleading. So what transpired was, on the 14th of February 2020, the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project made 2 requests under the Freedom of Information Act. Now, they sent a request to the Attorney General for the Federation and the Minister for Finance and Budget Planning, asking for details. One, the federal government should confirm the exact amounts the late General Sani Abacha allegedly looted from the public treasury, and 2, the exact amount that has been recovered. And in addition to stating what has been recovered, give specific details of what the money was used to do. So if it was used for contracts, give us the name of the contractors, give us the name of the contracts, the locations where the contracts should have been executed, and the agreements that were entered into before those recovered monies were sent back, repatriated, as the case may be. Now, only the Attorney General of the Federation responded to the Freedom of Information request. The Minister for Finance and Budget Planning, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, did not respond. Now, the AGF in his response said his ministry does not have custody of the records. However, he can speak to 630 million, which has been recovered since 2018. Of the 630 million, he said 322 million was recovered from Switzerland in January 20. And he stated that the funds were used for social investment project. He then said 308 million was being expected from the island of Jersey in conjunction with the US authorities, and that pending the arrival of money, it had been set aside for the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, the Abuja-Kano Expressway, and the Second Niger Bridge. Now, it is very sad that we cannot state with any certainty what left the treasury. Money leaves a trail. Money gets signed out, there's documentation to that effect. Money does not disappear into thin air. It leaves an account, goes into other accounts. There is a trail. When money is spent, there is a trail.
So money disappeared, though. We still don't know where.
So it's a reluctance. It's really sad that the federal government isn't taking this seriously. And it's sad that the Minister for Finance did not respond to this request, because that is the whole idea behind the freedom of information request.
Yes.
Now, the failure, Sarah has now said, following her failure to provide information and following the insufficient details provided by the AGF, they're preparing papers to go to court, because that is the next step as outlined in the Freedom of Information Act. And it reminds us once again, if this country must move forward, we must build institutions, lay down the procedure, lay down the framework, and follow it each every single time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr.
Reaction to the initial story that we shared on the disaster yesterday. Hussein from Surulere says, "Good morning, guys. The truth is, we never learn from past mistakes. We pray that God forbid we recurrence, but it will still happen. All this will still happen if we fail to do the needful. The scars of the January 27, 2000 Ikeja Cantonment bomb blast is still with us."
Thank you very much. We've had a number of comments coming with regards to the unfortunate incident in Abule-Odo or in Lagos State. We'll be looking at this in detail during Lagos Talks 901. So if we don't take your comments during this time, please join us at 9 o'clock for Lagos Talks 901. Move on to our next story here. Oil crash. Nigeria may lose $8.63 billion in 6 months. Now, Nigeria's economy may slide into another recession, according to this report in the Punch newspaper, as the 2020 budget is benchmarked on a $57 per barrel income generation, with 2.18 million barrels a day being produced. Unfortunately, due to world what's going on down, it's moving between $30 to $36 per barrel. Cheta,
give me a voice, I will tell you what to do. Now let us all complete. What the Punch, what you didn't mention is that this was a Goldman Sachs report, which I have been privileged to see. And the line that struck me because what they really talked about was Saudi Arabia, Russia, added an addendum, which they started on steel countries such as Nigeria will be hardest hit by the price war. They were trying to point out the fact that both Russia and Saudi Arabia have the reserves, foreign reserves, and oil reserves. Yes. Now, it strikes me that Nigeria is a really interesting country. Our national economic model, to all intents and purposes, was proven to be completely useless and subject to the whims of both Moscow and Riyadh last week. Yet, what was the biggest story in Nigeria? It was the drama of a politically irrelevant individual as a traditional ruler, because that's the truth. Traditional rulers are politically irrelevant. That was the biggest drama. Now, an already faltering Nigerian economy came under intense pressure last week at the CBN the hastily convened CBN meeting on Wednesday morning. It was clear that these guys were alarmed. There was a state of panic. The government has already experienced a steep decline in revenues in 2019. This trend was likely to continue in 2020. Now, it didn't just continue, it has accelerated. In addition, the oil price collapse has quickly turned into a severe foreign currency crisis. People began to immediately hoard dollars. You couldn't find dollars so I was in Abuja for half of last week, and you couldn't find dollars at the regular places. Such that the EFCC reverted to bad habits of going to raid places. They proudly posted a picture in Kaduna that they raided this thing, essentially expropriating private property. The CBN released a circular that was the most unrealistic thing unimaginable. We will not at some point it's best to just keep quiet.
That the market forces didn't determine the market conditions.
When your revenue,
it was clear as day.
Thank you.
Did you, sorry, Cheta, sorry to cut you because of our time. Did you see the reports from the roundtable, economic roundtable held with the president and the CBN governor last week? Do you think part of the conversation?
I watched the thing.
So what
And
was
the fact that they started as within the first speech, as in within the third paragraph of the first speech, there was already statements such as stabilize the naira, and what was this, something about imports. Already that tells me that they're not serious, that they are not looking at the real situation. Essentially, Nigeria's economic model is finished. It may not happen immediately, but this showed us we cannot keep relying on this our oil. Nigeria is not even a major player in the oil market. China produces more oil than Nigeria. Nigeria is the 14th largest producer, and our production is irrelevant, doesn't add anything to the conversation. We just wait and see for Saudi Arabia and Russia to determine what we'll do, and then we call ourselves a serious country.
All right, thank you very much. Since Cheta is not willing to tell us the way out, hopefully during Business Express 981
vote
tomorrow
for me,
morning.
He's willing, but he needs an
He
invoice.
needs an invoice.
Cornelius from Agbara says, it's high time we focus on the area of revenue generation. If we harness our solid mineral resources properly and accountable in an accountable way, it will not only generate revenue for the government, but also create many more jobs.
You see, we are wired to just think of commodities. Sell, extract from the ground and sell, extract from the ground and sell. Forget that solid minerals thing. We claim to have 200 million people. We don't, but that's another matter entirely. Make them productive. Do you know how well located Nigeria is geopolitically? With this large population, yes, we are not making use of it. It's a disgrace.
Yes, it is. Frank from Berger says, I just want to say thank you. Felix from Aja says, I want to give kudos to all you in the studio.
All right.
And hit the nail on the head. Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, Yinka.
Vincent.
Yinka says, see guys, finally, this whole social investment thing, it needs to be investigated, because it seems like some people have cashed out on this. All right, let's go to this next story on APIS. Lecturers protest deductions, non-payment of sabbatical scholars fees. So when I read this story, my eye was just popping open, like, really? Real? Apparently, as the APIS system, like the IPPIS, has been put in place by the federal government, some colleges of education academic staff union have revealed that there were some funny charges and deductions that have started happening, like National Housing Fund, a voluntary scheme that many of them kicked against when they mooted the idea. But talk us through this today.
Yeah, I'm beginning to wonder how come I'm the one that keeps landing this type of story. Anyway, so the arguments, in the last installment,
Yes.
the lecturers finally signed on, the class finally signed on. Although individually, over 50% of the members had signed on, but as a union, they now finally backed it.
So they're still contesting that percentage.
Yes.
They're saying that that's a figure that was federal government that they don't
think so, because obviously it cuts down or chips away at the bargaining position to say more than half of their members had signed up. But they've signed up as a union or as a group, and February I guess was the first time that they've seen how exactly it'll work. It's like when you collect an offer letter and it looks nice and juicy. It's when the first alert hits your account and it's like, where's all that money that was on paper? So it's okay, seriously, the truth is the argument that they've made all this time is that it doesn't take into consideration, or it didn't take into consideration, the peculiarities of tertiary institutions and how they're set up. I can argue that perhaps it's been because they haven't cooperated with the process early enough, and this is the first. This is the first experience.
Yes.
Perhaps now is the time for them to fine-tune it, add their own peculiarities for higher institutions into IPIS, and then these things won't occur again. Because you take, for instance, that the taxes were applied on the gross, and we all know that if you look at your breakdown, not all of the items are taxable. There's some that are tax exempt, but IPIS didn't take that into consideration and just applied it on everything. So they need to go forward, work with the government, to work with the authorities to smoothen this out. They mentioned this is the strangest thing. These things always highlight all sorts of things. They said did not include the peculiar earned academic allowance. I mean, if anyone knows what peculiar earned is I'll be interested in knowing.
Sabbatical.
I have no idea.
Going to
the-
another university.
no, there is also sabbatical.
attached to this.
He said it did not include that, and then it didn't include their colleague didn't include pay for their colleagues on sabbatical leave. I'll be interested in learning what the peculiarities are. I guess it varies from organization to organization, but
yeah.
typically if you're on sabbatical, I'd assume that it's unpaid leave. I may be wrong. Because when these lecturers go for sabbatical, if I'm still paying you while you're on sabbatical, there must be some proof and link that you are contributing to my
So
organization.
the lecturers are
in a
sent to a
certain
different
way.
school on sabbatical, and that institution pays them.
Yeah, so that's the point. So usually it's for and you say, oh, I'm going on sabbatical because maybe I want to further some study, I'm going to research, and that institution accepts you and then pays your fees. So for you to still expect income in your original institution is like double pay, and that really isn't.
That's a fair point, and this is what EPC is meant to check.
To help us highlight.
yes, to highlight these things and also
This
stop.
EP staying with us is one place where I support the government.
All right, Shagun says, Shagun has a comment on national media. He says, blame the national media for making the Emir saga more important than the looming economic difficulties. They are also the reason governors get away with complete incompetence because they mainly focus on the presidency.
Yeah, it's easier to report, and we like gossip. Just it's we like the salacious.
Yes, we do. All right, it's sensational stories. We have two stories I'd like us to touch on very quickly. And the first one here is on state renege on agreement to reduce right-of-way charges for telcos. Cheta, I'd like you to take this very quickly because I'd like to touch on the coronavirus story.
Speaking of governors, so these days reporting that after agreeing, there was a meeting in January with the Minister of Communication and the telecommunications companies over the right-of-way matter, and the states agreed essentially to pay to collect 145 per kilometer, 145. But instead, some states are still collecting between 3,000 and 6,000 per linear meter.
Yeah.
The states have, as in they agreed, and then they still went to start doing it. There's so many things involved here. Number one, rights of states, which is something I'm passionate about. In a federation, which Nigeria pretends to be, the federal government really does not have the right to tell the states charge this. There should be guidelines, and then that's it. Having said that, the fiscal situation of the states is highlighting this. The states are broke.
Yes. So they need to generate revenue.
Bankrupt. So they are looking.
They're not bankrupt yet. Go on.
Nigeria is bankrupt. And let's not argue about that one. Anyway, they are looking for money anywhere, and it now highlights the testing, which is short-sightedness. In looking for money, they are risking driving businesses away, or squeezing businesses such that the businesses cannot even generate enough money for them to generate more money. So it's a vicious cycle.
Yes.
And what we need to do is to think of ways to make this vicious cycle into a virtuous cycle. Otherwise, in 50 years, we'll still be talking the same thing.
That's right.
Thank you. It's a very good article to go through. It's in the This Day newspaper. State renege on agreement to reduce right-of-way charges for telcos. Really important. Very quickly, Mr. C, let's take this update on coronavirus. NCDC, a suspected case in Enugu official. I saw this story develop on Twitter, but please take us through the story.
So very quickly, a lady returned from Europe and was en route Enugu through Owerri, and she was suspected to have COVID-19 and was taken in for testing. I've just gone through the Twitter handle of the NCDC, and the test result negative.
If you have somebody coming from outside and going to the east now to Enugu, that's for the person will land in Lagos or Abuja, and then go through either Asaba or
by road, and then by
in
road
both Asaba and Owerri, the number of touts outside the airports that you can enter a bus, touch your bag, you can enter a bus. Contact tracing will be a nightmare. So, as in, when I saw this, that the results came out negative, the kind of sigh of relief,
well, I just want to add something very quickly. Unfortunately, we're getting to a point where we may have to suspend public gatherings because this patient came in from Owerri. I want to believe contact tracing has started for everyone that was on the flight with her.
Yeah.
Even on the way to. We're not testing, we're screening. If we testing.
Can we just state the difference, like in 10 seconds?
Okay, screening. Screening basically is they hold a thermometer and check to see if you're displaying symptoms.
That's screening.
That's screening.
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 Yes.
All right, let's However, don't forget, Lagos Stocks 901 comes up at 9 o'clock. Here we have the opportunity to deeper into this particular headline. 15 confirmed dead as survivors salvage properties from Lagos fire from Premium Times. Thank you, Tunde Okufi Abikus. Thank you, Mr. C, Mr. C. And of course, thanks, Cheta at Chxta. We'll go on a break now. When we come back at 8:15, it will be time for us to talk sports in the locker room 981.
We're not even, let's see, we're not ready for everything. We're not ready for social distancing.
No.
Social distancing includes this.
Yeah, it
Yes.
does.
We're in a closed room.
We shouldn't actually be having any
We're in a closed
analysis.
room.
Yeah. So if
Do you
any
know-
one of us here,
If anyone here, mics, we're sharing mics
yeah,
everything.
we sanitize the mic to
No,
get
but
any
the thing
comfort.
about it is,
If anyone is asymptomatic,
Yeah.
Ayo, see what he's saying.
And many is
Right now, the World Health Organization and some of these health experts around, global health experts, are saying that's the most effective way of dealing
Yeah,
with
yeah.
social distancing.
Yeah.
No no.
Trevor,
That's why
Noah,
shops are shut now.
Daily Show,
No,
they're not
no,
recording.
no.
Not just
Daily Show.
they are recording,
so
but
many-
they stop studio audience.
They stop. No, studio. They're not recording.
Oh,
they're,
they're
not
not
going.
They're
to
not
the
recording,
studio.
no.
Okay,
Trevor
I
Noah
need
sent a video
Apple
from-
in the US,
They're
they
not
shut down.
recording.
Yeah, they shut down most.
Apple
So,
and,
but the truth
but
is
then the
that
thing is,
in terms
Nigeria,
of screening and
generality
tests,
of
we
our-
can't test now because testing won't
We
take
don't have
2
enough
days.
tests.
We don't even have.
We don't have enough
Look at-
tests.
America
so
doesn't
the
guys,
Enugu
guys,
We
woman-
doesn't have.
Another
Guys,
point we didn't
let
talk
us-
about.
Valentine, I need to take a picture.
So Enugu woman,
Shit,
what
that
the
thing is
point?
off.
The point we didn't talk
It's
about.
YouTube. It's still YouTube.
Yeah.
Yes.
The point we didn't talk about with Enugu
We can
woman
turn it
is
off.
also the
No,
fact
no,
that
no.
she went